The rain poured heavily that evening, drumming against the windows of the nearly empty city bus. James, a seasoned bus driver with over 2 decades of experience, kept his hands steady on the wheel, his eyes scanning the dimly lit streets. It had been an ordinary shift, picking up tired workers, students, and late-night commuters, until he spotted something unusual at a bus stop ahead. A small figure sat alone on the bench, curled up, shoulders shaking. As he slowed down and pulled over, the headlights illuminated the child, a little girl, no older than 6 or 7, wearing a bright pink jacket now soaked from the rain. Her face was buried in her hands, her tiny body trembling. James opened the doors, and a gust of cold wind rushed in. The girl barely reacted. He leaned slightly forward, his voice gentle. "Hey there, sweetheart. Are you lost?" The girl slowly lifted her head, her eyes wide with tears streaming down her cheeks. She didn't respond, just looked up at him with a mix of fear and hope. James's heart tightened. He had seen a lot in his years driving buses. Rushed passengers, late night, drunks, even the occasional troublemaker, but never a lost crying child sitting alone in the rain. Something was wrong. Carefully, he stepped out of his seat and crouched down to her level. "It's okay, you're safe now. Do you know where your home is?" The girl hesitated before shaking her head. James frowned. "What's your name, sweetheart?" A soft, barely audible whisper came through. "Lily." "All right, Lily. Do you remember where you were before you got here?" She sniffled, rubbing her eyes. I was with my mom and dad, but then I got lost." Her little voice cracked at the end, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. James exhaled slowly, thinking fast. He couldn't just leave her there. He had a bus route to complete, but he also couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in his gut. Something told him this little girl needed him. "Okay, Lily, tell you what, why don't you come inside where it's warm? We'll figure this out together." Lily hesitated, glancing around as if expecting her parents to appear. When no one did, she nodded and climbed onto the bus, her shoes squelching against the floor. James grabbed a spare jacket from behind his seat and draped it over her shoulders. "Better." She nodded, still sniffling. James returned to his seat, his mind racing. He couldn't just call the police right away. What if her parents were frantically searching for her just a few streets away? He needed to be smart about this. As the bus rumbled forward, James kept glancing at the rearview mirror, watching Lily hug the oversized jacket around herself. The other few passengers stole glances at her, whispering among themselves. He ignored them and reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Bus 42. I've got a situation here." A crackling voice responded. "Go ahead, James. I've got a lost child on board. Name's Lily. Found her alone at a stop near 5th and Maple. She's soaked and scared. No sign of her parents." There was a pause. "All right, we'll notify the authorities. Keep her safe. Any details on her parents?" "Not yet," James replied, lowering his voice. "She's too shaken up to say much." Lily suddenly tugged at his sleeve. James turned to her, raising a reassuring eyebrow. "My house has a red door," she whispered. James felt a flicker of hope. "That's good. Do you remember anything else? Maybe a street name?" She shook her head, eyes full of worry. James tapped, his fingers against the steering wheel. A red door. Not much to go on, but it was something. He knew he had to be careful. He couldn't just drive around aimlessly. The city was too big, and time was slipping away. Then, an idea struck him. "Lily," he said, keeping his voice calm, "have you been on a bus before?" She nodded hesitantly. "Do you remember if you took a bus today? Maybe with your mom or dad?" Her little forehead scrunched in thought. Then she slowly nodded. "Mommy, we were on a bus after the store, but then I lost her." James felt his heart squeeze at the thought of a panicked mother desperately searching for her missing child. He took a deep breath, his mind racing through possible routes. "All right, kiddo," he said, trying to sound reassuring. "We're gonna figure this out, I promise." As the bus rolled through the wet streets, James felt a shift in the air. Something told him that this was no ordinary case of a lost child. Something deeper was at play, and he had no idea that by the end of the night, the little girl's parents would find a way to thank him in a manner he never could have imagined. James kept driving, his mind working through the puzzle piece by piece. The rain had eased into a light drizzle, but the streets were still slick and shimmering under the streetlights. He glanced back at Lily, who was curled up in one of the seats, the oversized jacket wrapped around her like a blanket. She looked exhausted, her little body sagging, her fingers clutching the fabric as if it was the only thing keeping her safe. He knew that feeling, that lost, helpless feeling. James had been driving buses for years, but he remembered a time when he was just a boy, wandering the streets alone after getting separated from his mother in a crowded shopping district. It had been a stranger who found him, who had taken the time to help. Maybe that's why this moment felt so personal. Lily needed someone to care. His radio crackled again. "James! Any update? Police are en route to your location." James sighed. "Not yet, but she just told me something important. She took a bus with her mum after going to a store, and she remembers a red door on her house." "That's not much to go on," the dispatcher replied. "Stay put when you finish your route. Let the authorities handle it." James hesitated. He knew they were right. That was protocol. But something deep in his gut told him there was more to this than just waiting. He grabbed the radio again. "What if I check a few places first? Just along my route. I know this neighborhood. I might recognize the area she's talking about." There was a pause before the dispatcher sighed. "James, I won't do anything reckless," he promised. "Just a quick pass-through. If nothing turns up, I'll wait at the last stop." Another pause. Then, "All right, but be careful." James turned the bus onto a familiar road. He had driven this route hundreds of times, passing by small corner shops, rows of houses, and apartment buildings. His eyes darted from one home to another, searching for red doors. Most were brown, white, or blue. None seemed to match Lily's memory. Behind him, she shifted in her seat. "Mister." James looked at her through the mirror. "Yeah, sweetheart." She bit her lip, hesitant. What if they're not looking for me?" James felt a pang in his chest. "Of course they're looking for you, Lily. Your parents must be so worried." She lowered her head. "I don't know." His grip on the steering wheel tightened. That didn't sound right. Something wasn't adding up. "Did you and your parents fight before you got lost?" he asked carefully. She shook her head. "No. Mommy was scared. She was holding my hand really tight. Then she let go. I was trying to keep up, but there were so many people." Her voice trembled. "And then she was gone." James frowned. If her mother had been scared, that meant something had happened before Lily got lost. Not just an accident, but something more. He kept driving, scanning the streets. Then, just as he was about to turn around, Lily let out a small gasp. "There!" She pointed toward a narrow street lined with small homes. I think that's my house." James slowed down, pulling up alongside the curb. He looked at the row of houses, and sure enough, there was a red door. It was slightly worn, chipped at the edges, but unmistakably red. The porch light was on, casting a dim glow onto the wet pavement. James turned to Lily. "Are you sure?" She nodded. but uncertainty flickered in her eyes. It looks like it, but James didn't like that hesitation. Let's be careful. All right, I'll walk you up. He parked the bus and led Lily toward the house. Each step felt heavy with uncertainty. He knocked twice, his heart thudding. Silence. Then, footsteps. Slow. Hesitant. The door cracked open, revealing a man in his late 40s. His face was unshaven, his eyes tired. When he saw Lily, his expression didn't light up with relief. Instead, there was a flicker of something else, something James couldn't quite place. "Lily?" The man's voice was rough, surprised. Lily shrank back slightly, gripping James's hand. "Daddy," James frowned. Something wasn't right. He had expected a frantic parent, maybe tears of relief. But this man, he looked more shocked than happy. "Where have you been?" the man asked, his eyes shifting from Lily to James. "She got lost," James said, keeping his tone steady. "I found her at a bus stop alone. She couldn't remember where. She lived at first, but she described this house." The man nodded slowly. "Right. Yeah, we've been looking for her." His voice was unconvincing. James's instincts screamed at him. He had seen desperate parents before. This wasn't it. He crouched beside Lily. "Do you feel safe here, sweetheart?" Lily hesitated, just for a second. But that second was enough. James straightened and looked the man in the eye. "I think we should call her mother. Let her know Lily's safe." The man's jaw tightened. "She's not here." James narrowed his eyes. "Where is she?" A beat of silence. Then, the man sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "Look, it's complicated." James's stomach twisted. "What do you mean complicated?" The man glanced over his shoulder, into the house, then stepped outside, lowering his voice. "Lily's mom. She left. Took off a few days ago. I was supposed to—" He exhaled sharply. "I didn't even realize Lily was gone until you showed up." James felt his blood turn cold. "You didn't know your daughter was missing." "I thought she was with her mother," the man said quickly. "I swear I didn't know." A choked sob broke between them. James turned to see Lily staring at her father, tears forming again. "You didn't look for me," she whispered. James clenched. His jaw. Whatever was going on here, Lily was not safe. Behind them, the distant sound of sirens grew louder. James had never felt more relieved. He had called the police as soon as he pulled up to the house. The man heard them too, his expression shifting from frustration to panic. "Look, this is a misunderstanding." James stepped forward, his voice firm. "No, it's not." The sirens drew closer. The truth was about to come out, and James knew whatever happened next would change Lily's life forever. The wail of sirens grew louder, flashing red and blue lights bouncing off the wet pavement. Lily's father tensed, his eyes darting toward the approaching police cars. James could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them all. A police car skidded to a stop, and two officers stepped out, their expressions sharp and alert. A female officer with kind but serious eyes approached first, her gaze flicking between James, Lily, and her father. "We got a report about a missing child," she said firmly. "What's going on here?" Lily's father forced a smile, raising his hand slightly, as if to prove he wasn't a threat. "It's just a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "Lily's my daughter. I was worried sick about her." "Liar." Lily's voice cut through the air. Quiet but strong. She stood close to James, gripping his jacket with both hands. "You didn't even know I was gone." The officer's face hardened. "Sir, we're going to need you to step back." Lily's father opened his mouth as if to argue, but James could see it in his eyes. He knew he had lost control of the situation. One of the officers turned to James. You're the one who found her. James nodded. She was alone at a bus stop, soaking wet and terrified. She didn't know how to get home, but when we finally got here, something didn't feel right. He glanced down at Lily, giving her a reassuring nod before looking back at the officers. She told me her mom was scared before she got lost, and now her dad says he didn't even know she was missing. The officers exchanged a quick look. The female officer crouched down to Lily's level, softening her voice. Sweetheart, do you know where your mom is? Lily shook her head, her lip trembling. She was holding my hand, but then she was gone. James clenched his fists. He had suspected something was wrong, but now it was clear. Lily's mother hadn't just left. Something had happened. A second police car pulled up, and another officer stepped out, speaking quietly into his radio. The first officer straightened and turned to Lily's father. Sir, we need you to come with us for some questioning. His face darkened. This is ridiculous, he snapped. I told you, she's my daughter. Exactly, the officer said firmly. And you just admitted you didn't know she was missing. We need to clear some things up. Lily's father scowled, but didn't resist, as the officers led him to the squad car. Lily gripped James's hand tighter, her breathing uneven. James crouched beside her. It's okay, kiddo, he said softly. You're safe now. Tears welled up in Lily's eyes. I just want my mommy. The officers worked quickly, speaking into their radios, making calls. One of them approached James. We just got confirmation. Lily's mother was found at a local police station. She had reported Lily missing hours ago, but had no idea where to look. She was frantic. James let out a slow breath of relief. She's okay? She's shaken up, but she's safe, the officer confirmed. We're bringing her here now. Lily's little shoulders sagged, as if all the fear and exhaustion were finally catching up to her. James sat beside her on the curb, rubbing small circles on her back. Just a little longer, okay. Minutes later, another car pulled up. The back door flung open before the vehicle had fully stopped, and a woman ran out, her face pale, her hair messy, her eyes scanning desperately. Mommy! Lily shot forward, her small feet splashing through puddles. As she ran straight into her mother's arms, the woman sobbed as she dropped to her knees, holding Lily so tightly. It was as if she was afraid to ever let go again. James stood back, watching with a deep sense of relief. Lily was safe. That was all that mattered. The officers gave them a moment before one of them stepped forward, speaking gently to Lily's mother. Ma'am, we're going to need to ask you some questions, but right now, you should know, your daughter is okay, thanks to this man. The woman lifted her teary eyes to James, and in a second, her expression shifted from relief to overwhelming gratitude. She stood up, still holding Lily in her arms, and walked toward him. You found her? She whispered. James nodded. She's a strong kid. A fresh wave of tears spilled down her cheeks. Without warning, she threw her free arm around him in a tight hug. Thank you, she choked out. Thank you for not just leaving her there, for keeping her safe. James patted her back awkwardly but warmly. I couldn't just drive away. She pulled back, smiling through her tears. Most people would have. James glanced at Lily, who was now holding on to her mother, like she would never let go. She deserved better than that. The officers continued their work. But the most important part of the night was over. As James turned back toward his bus, ready to finish his shift, Lily's mother called out again, Wait! He turned, and before he could react, she pressed something into his hand. He looked down, a small delicate locket. It was my mother's, she said softly. I want you to have it. I don't have money, I don't have anything else to give, but you gave me my daughter back." James hesitated, feeling the weight of the small piece of jewelry in his palm. He wanted to refuse, but something about the way she looked at him told him that accepting it meant something to her. He closed his fingers around it and gave her a nod. "Thank you." As he climbed back onto the bus, he looked in the rearview mirror one last time. Lily and her mother stood together under the streetlight, holding each other close. James let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding and pulled away from the curb. The rain had stopped. The streets were quiet again, and for the first time that night, he felt like everything had finally found its way home.